This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.
Hello and welcome to a new podcast from Blood Red, Under the Radar. I'm Matt Addison here as we take an in-depth look at a player who's been linked with Liverpool of late and will be playing for Ajax tonight in the Champions League clash between the sides. If you want to know more about what to expect from Ajax, you can listen back through the Behind Enemy Lines podcast from a few weeks ago. But on this one, we're going to take a look at one man in particular, central defender Perr Schuurs. To do that, we first have a man who joined me on the Behind Enemy Lines show a few weeks ago, Michael Statham of Football Oranje. Michael, thanks for taking the time once again to join us. We do appreciate you coming back onto the Blood Red channel just a few weeks after your last appearance.
No, thanks for having me on, guys. Of course, really do enjoy talking about Dutch football, and this guy's another great talent who I'm sure I'll give you some good info on in a minute. But yeah, and of course, another great clash coming up against Liverpool. So yeah, hoping to see Ajax doing really well again on the European stage.
Yeah, absolutely. A very impressive team when they're at their best. There's no doubt about that. But we are, of course, here, as I say, to talk about Perr Schuurs in particular. I mean, first and foremost, it's a really straightforward but slightly ambiguous question. How big a fan of him are you?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of him, Matt. I do really like Perr Schuurs. He fits the role of Matt Addison, the void that I guess he left a year and a half ago. He's a centre-back. He's strong. He's got really good skills on the ball. He made his name with Fortuna Sittard a few years ago. And when he was 17, he left. He was captain even at 17 in the Dutch second tier. And then he went on to move to Ajax, and he's gone to achieve great things, slowly but surely working his way to become a first team regular. What I like about Schuurs is that he's very brave. He's very determined. He takes risks. And in an Ajax team that's full of that risk taking, it yields great rewards. And I think we've seen that on the European stage again this season.
Yeah, I mean, how impressive has he been this season? It seems to be a kind of breakout season, really, for him. It's the first time when Liverpool played Ajax in that first match. That was the first time I'd really heard his name being spoken about.
Yeah, he's taken a few years to sort of build up to being a first-team regular. I think everyone expected that when he first signed from Fortuna that he was going to jump straight into the first team, but that wasn't the case. He took a year to develop in the second tier with the young Ajax, their second team. But then last season, he started making a few more appearances in the Eredivisie, but he was wobbly. He made mistakes. And it's only this season that he's pretty much starting every game, and he's a starting centre-back. Him next to Daley Blind, who I'm sure we're all familiar with now, returning to Ajax, the Ajax team. He's an experienced head next to Schuurs, and together they make a good partnership. I think the only thing they lack is a bit of pace, but apart from that, yeah, this season's been a great season for Blind and Schuurs together. They don't see him as haphazard as they were last season, and they seem a lot more composed together now.
Do you think it makes sense then that Liverpool should be interested in him, even though it is very early in his Ajax career, even to be talking about a move somewhere else?
It's not alien though, is it, to start featuring these names with these teams? Yeah, he's got the potential though to go this far and become this good. De Ligt, of course, was younger and probably is ultimately going to be the best defender. But that doesn't mean that Schuurs is a poor defender at all. He does reach a lot of those heights. And you can see that he's obviously taken a lot from De Ligt in the short time that they would have played at the same club together. He's just got these attributes that are De Ligt, but also make him a very good Premier League defender, if you like. He's someone who's going to probably play in England or Germany. I really wouldn't be surprised by that because of his build and because of the way he is on the ball. He likes to go and meet attacking players. He likes to give them a shoulder barge. He likes to win those headers. He's a very different type of defender to what we normally see in an Ajax t-shirt.
In terms of sort of the players he's sort of likened to, I mean, you mentioned there Matthijs de Ligt. Is there anybody else that maybe Liverpool fans might have seen a little bit more of, who's maybe a little bit more experienced that he might be similar to?
Goodness me, that's put me on the spot. The first person that came to my head, this is going to sound wrong, Gary Cahill. Similar kind of defender. Yeah, it's just the first person that came to my head when I thought of someone who was very similar. Because of the way they play. I mean, Cahill on a good day could be Schuurs on a good day. The only other person who, I guess, from a Liverpool ranks point of view, would be Van Dijk. He's a similar defender in that respect. Just really good in the ball, really strong, and he's reading the game really well.
And in terms of his style then, do you think he'd be the right fit if Liverpool were to make a move for him?
I think so. He's going to be up there with the best defenders that they'll have if he goes on to have a very good season this season. If you ask me, I think that Schuurs needs to be with Ajax for at least the season after this one. And that depends on how good a season he has, of course. But going on the course he's on right now, yeah, he's just stepping it up so much. You know, this stage, 12 months ago, he was a completely different defender. So he's made all of the right progression. He is 21 years old now. I guess if you're going to say is he going to be a Liverpool regular 12 months from now, I'd say no. But that doesn't mean that he can go on to become a good player for Liverpool should he sign for them. But I can really see him playing for a top team in the Premier League, that's for sure.
There has been some suggestion of a 27 million or 30 million euro bid submitted for Liverpool, from Liverpool, I should say, but sort of reports in Holland suggesting that that's probably not the case. I mean, do you think that's around about the sort of figure that Ajax would demand for him, or do you think they'd be looking for a little bit more?
No, I think that's very cheap. I think that's a very low price for Schuurs. By the end of this season, if he's playing with Ajax in Europe after winter, if he goes on to win the league with them too, I think that drives his price up 40, 50 million, if not more. I mean, De Ligt went for a far higher. And again, I come back to De Ligt, but you can compare them quite a lot because they are quite similar defenders.
Yeah, you mentioned De Ligt there. It seems almost inevitable, really, that Schuurs will move on at some point, as Frankie de Jong as well has done so. Would Ajax stand in his way, do you think, if Liverpool were to make a move, even if potentially it might be really early in his career? Do you think they'd let him go at this point, or would they maybe want to keep him that extra season to drive the price up even more, potentially?
That was what will be on Ajax minds. Marco Overmars, the director, and Van der Sar, they'll both be talking about this because this is the kind of thing they do together at Ajax. They keep players for as long as they can and they try and sell them for as big a price as they can. That's the way the club works. You'll see that with many of the players too. For example, the goalkeeper, Andre Onana, they've kept him for as long as possible, kept in for another year and then another year again because they know that they can drive his price up. They know that they can go for a really high fee to a big club around Europe. The same is going to happen with Schuurs. But as to answer your question, I think that if he wants to leave after this season, he will. I think that they'll give him the choice in that. But they'll probably also give him a warning. They'll say to him, you've only been an Ajax regular for one season. Do you think that's going to stand you a good stead in the long term? Do you think that means you're automatically going to become a regular at a top European club? No. And they'll give Schuurs that kind of pressure to feel as though he should stay at Ajax. I'm sure that's what will happen because it's happened with the likes of Donny van der Beek and also De Ligt in the past. They've not left at the first opportunity.
The Blood Red Podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
I'm now joined by tactics and scouting writer Josh Williams, of course, of the Analysing Anfield podcast. And Josh, the name Perr Schuurs of Ajax has come up a lot of late. I asked Michael earlier in the podcast if he was a big fan of him, but how interested are you by Schuurs?
Yeah, well, when he moved to Ajax, I was initially aware of him a little bit. I think that move is what made me aware of him, but I haven't previously looked into him too much. I think what made me most aware was, funnily enough, when he faced Liverpool. When he faced Liverpool, he seemed to cope, I thought, with the threat of Sadio Mane quite well, which is easier said than done. Obviously, considering Mane is quite a complete player. So he coped fairly well, and then when I started seeing links to Liverpool, obviously on the back of Liverpool's injury crisis, there's certain links that I feel like I can immediately rule out just because of what I know about Liverpool as a club and how they recruit. This wasn't one of those. This is one that I thought to myself, despite the link being relatively vague, I did think to myself there could be something in this. So I've looked into him since, but whether it's going to be a completely accurate link remains to be seen.
Yeah, he's certainly one that seems to be linked fairly frequently. We don't know at this stage whether Liverpool will make a move. But just in terms of sort of his style and the way that he might fit in with a Liverpool team, you sort of mentioned it briefly there that you think he could be someone who might be a decent fit for Liverpool. It's not one that you'd throw away straight away in terms of that link with the Reds. How do you think he would fit in? Do you think he would be the right sort of player for Liverpool to target?
Well, I think the big thing with Liverpool centre-back is they have to be dominant. Above everything else, they have to, display a degree of dominance in various phases of the game. So, they've got to be aerially dominant. Pep Linders spoke about that in the past, saying that, it's quite a crucial aspect for a centre-back to have for a pressing team. So, for that, he has to be tall, which, fair play to him he is. I think he's around 6'3", 21 years old, obviously. Funnily enough, despite being 6'3", this is the one thing that put me off him a little bit when I did look into him. Despite being 6'3", he's not actually that good in the air, according to the numbers at least. This season, I think he's improved a tiny bit. Yeah, so in the Dutch Eredivisie and the Champions League at the minute, he's currently posting an aerial dual success rate of about 60.4%. That's not particularly high. I think last season in the Premier League, Matip, although he didn't play too frequently, posted about 83%. Van Dijk played every game, posted in at around 70 to 73, I think, percent. Gomez around 64. So for Schuurs to be 6'3", but only posting around 60% aerial success is a bit of a surprise. But I do think he has the height thing on his side. I think he coped fairly well with Sadio Mane, so he demonstrated an ability to cope 1v1 against players. Coping in behind would be another thing. I'm not sure he's the quickest, but he wasn't slow enough when he faced Liverpool to be, for that to show up. So and obviously he's very good on the ball. Typical Dutch centre back. He's good with his long passes and stuff like that. That was an aspect that I picked up on quite quickly with him. So I think he ticks some boxes without ticking all of them. So it remains to be seen whether Liverpool will deem that to be enough. Obviously, with his age being just 21, he's got plenty of room to improve. But it's just whether he ticks enough boxes at the moment for Liverpool to think he's got a high enough ceiling to reach the top, I suppose.
There's sort of been a £27 million price tag placed on him in some of the reports. I mean, the sort of intimation from Michael earlier in the podcast was that they'd have to spend more on him if they were to sign him, Liverpool. But would you be looking to spend that sort of money on a player who essentially, once Joe Gomez and Virgil van Dijk would be back fit and playing regularly, he'd at best be Liverpool's third choice, you'd imagine, with Joel Matip in there and one or two other options as well. So would you expect Liverpool to spend that sort of money on someone who wouldn't necessarily be playing as much once those players are back from this crisis?
Probably not, to be honest. I think Liverpool have generally been really, really good at spending according to the squad void and how much value that player is going to add to Liverpool's season in terms of points and in terms of goals added and goals prevented. If you look at, for example, Kostas Tsimikas, obviously there was a very specific budget to sign him. Jamal Lewis went a little bit above that budget, so we opted against signing him. If you look at Takumi Minamino, obviously that was a rotation option for the squad. A player who's going to come in and play very sporadic minutes, just as kind of to give the likes of Roberto Firmino a break. Again, that was around 7 million. So Liverpool do tend to spend according to what that position in the squad is worth and what a third choice central defender is worth. Fourth choice central defender possibly is worth. There's a question mark attached to that. I think in terms of 30 million, I'd probably suggest that's the absolute max. I don't think Liverpool would spend more than that. I think there's very, very little chance of that happening. 27 million for a 21-year-old, 6'3" Dutch centre-back who's good with the ball at his feet, I think is quite reasonable. And if you look at Ajax's typical business, they don't usually tend to take buying clubs to the cleaners that much. If you look at Donny van der Beek, Davinson Sanchez, Hakim Ziyech, they all go for around 35 million, and I don't think Schuurs is as big of a player as a Ziyech or a Van der Beek or a Sanchez. So I think 27 million is probably on the money, to be honest. Whether Liverpool will pay that, I'm not overly sure. If they would, it's probably max.
And just to finish off then, I know you've spoken about plenty of other centre-backs that Liverpool could potentially target. Given what you know about Perr Schuurs, do you think there's probably other options who might be better suited to Liverpool, maybe at a better price as well then?
Yeah, well, we spoke about this in the Analysing Anfield podcast quite recently. I like a player called Sven Botman, who was incidentally at Ajax last season, or he was contracted to them at least. I think he's spent a bit of time on loan. He's currently at Lille. He's a year younger than Schuurs. I think he's the same height, if not an inch taller. He is good in the air, according to numbers. Equally good with the ball at his feet. You know, he's Dutch, very similar to Schuurs in many ways, I suppose, but seems to have, you know, the boxes that Schuurs doesn't tick, Botman does seem to tick. The only issue with this is he recently signed for Lille from Ajax in the summer just gone for, I think it was below 10 million actually. But I think it was a 5-year deal. And if you look at the business that Lille tend to do in comparison to Ajax, Lille do have a bit of a reputation for buying clubs to the cleaners. You know, if you look at Nicolas Pepe, Victor Osimhen, I think is how you pronounce it, moved from Lille to Napoli in the summer for around 70 million. Gabriel, fair enough, moved to Arsenal for I think around 35 million. But yeah, he's a player that I like, but whether he's attainable, you know, affordable in terms of what Lille would demand for the services remains to be seen. But I would prioritise him over a Perr Schuurs.